New Orleans moves closer to selecting a permanent police chief.
And the city says out of 33 candidates for the job, the outside organization it hired has whittled the list down to 6 semi-finalists. David Jones joins us now to break down what each candidate brings to the table. David.
Yeah, Lauren, look, when I spoke with New Orleans Chief Administrative Officer Gilbert Montano earlier this evening, he emphasized how crucial this selection will be and said he believes they have a strong list of candidates.
This is an incredible list. I feel demonstrates how important New Orleans is to the rest of the country and why it makes such an impact.
6 semi-finalists have been named as contenders for the top spot at NOPD. Only one current NOPD interim superintendent, Michelle Woodfork, is an internal candidate. The city brought on the International Association of Chiefs of Police, or IACP, to lead the search.
IACP has done an incredible job. They have been methodical, they've been complex.
New Orleans Chief Administrative Officer Gilbert Montano going through the list of semi-finalists, which he says he just received.
Experience is very vast. My first perusal of the resumes have approximately, 200 years of experience.
Woodfork has been at the helm of NOPD since December, taking over as interim in the wake of the retirement of her predecessor, Sean Ferguson. The 52-year-old is the first black female to lead the NOPD, has 31 years of experience at the department, and is the niece of former NOPD Chief Warren Woodfork. Cedric Andres graduated from Southern University in New Orleans. Andres says he has more than 31 years of law enforcement experience, 13 of them at the supervisor level. He stepped down this year as the police chief in Henderson, Nevada. 63-year-old Ann Kirkpatrick has a law degree from the University of Memphis and 21 years of command-level experience. Kirkpatrick was the first female police chief of the Oakland, California Police Department and former chief of Spokane, Washington Police Department. She now does police consulting and instruction. David Franklin has 27 years of supervisory experience, was second in command at Albuquerque PD up until last year. He was a longtime captain with the Texas Department of Public Safety before that. Jared Phelps has 27 years of supervisory experience and is a lieutenant colonel with the Prince William County Police Department in Virginia, which he has served at since 1996 and served a short stint as acting chief. Finally, 45-year-old Deshaun Beaufort has 22 years of supervisory experience. Beaufort is currently leading the detective division for the Philadelphia Police, which he has been with since 1996. He also ran internal affairs at the department until 2021, when the Philadelphia Inquirer reported Beaufort was involved in a road rage incident with a civilian while off duty, which cost him the promotion. Montano says the candidates will now be interviewed by local panelists before a list of an undetermined number of finalists is provided to the mayor. Those interviews will happen on Thursday and Friday this week.
And I think we have been provided an incredible list of candidates, and I believe and I'm excited for the next 2 days to personally meet with all of them, amongst some of my peers as well as the external stakeholders.
And those interviews tomorrow and Friday will be held with a litany of city officials and civic leaders. Some of the folks include Paul Flower, president of Woodward Construction, Lamar Davis, superintendent of the Louisiana State Police, Eric Hessler, and Donovan Livicari from the Police Association and Fraternal Order of Police, respectively, and former Cantrell City Attorney turned Ochsner executive Sonny LaBeouf, among others. The Office of the Independent Police Monitor was critical of the panel, though, saying there was no inclusion of leaders from organizations in the community advocating for crime victims or working with vulnerable populations.
The panel also could have benefited from the voices of our numerous neighborhood associations in the city of New Orleans and the multiple community police advisory boards that exist in the different police districts and that are already developed to hear residents' input on crime and suggestions on how to improve the performance of the NOPD.
Cement pointed out the panel lacks input from advocacy organizations. It says she would have hoped to see more community stakeholders involved. The interviews tomorrow and Friday will happen at an undisclosed location. After this list is whittled down to the finalist, it's passed on to the mayor, who will then select her finalist, who would go before city council for confirmation. Lauren?